At the National Ames Center, we're funded by the Office of Special Education Programs at the Department of Ed. Our specific charge is to increase both the availability and the use of accessible materials and technologies for individuals with disabilities across the lifespan. So we work with representatives from early childhood, K-12, higher ed, and workforce development. And of course, as part of that charge, we work with families and publishers and developers to increase the availability of what is on the market for agencies across all four of those groups. So that's really our goal. While we're providing technical assistance to raise awareness and knowledge, we're also working on the developer side to improve what options we have. And of course, we use UDL to guide that. So Sam's going to take it from here with the first part of these components of an accessible learning environment. And then I will follow up with some of the digital accessibility and best practices.
We think about an accessible learning environment. We think about it in the context of remote instruction or blended instruction, brick and mortar settings. We really think about universal design for learning as being foundational to that work. Universal design for learning really has as its kind of foundational layer, thinking about ensuring that people can access the learning environment. If they can't perceive that environment, if they can't engage with the environment, navigate the digital environment, they can't really move further from thinking about accessing information to turning that into meaningful learning experiences, demonstrating their understanding, being motivated to persist. And so compliance with digital accessibility standards is really, really key. And then understanding how that fits in with best practices. Universal design for learning really has three broad principles that are grounded in what we understand about how networks in our brains work and thinking about how that applies in learning environments and the variability from one person to the next, but also from a single person from one context to the next. The principles really say what we want to do firstly is think about related to our affective network, our center part of our brain that really focuses on our fight or flight. Why do I pay attention to this in the first place? We really want to think about providing multiple means of engagement. And we want to do that because not everybody's motivated in the same ways by tasks, neither intrinsically or extrinsically, right? And so we want to attend to those differences in how people engage. Similarly, and probably what aligns most with accessibility is the focus on our recognition network. This is really at the back of our brain and really focuses on the many ways in which we perceive information. That differs very much from one learner to the next. And it again differs in one learner over time. So you can imagine somebody who had a hearing impairment needing captioning on a video, but you can also imagine someone who was using their mobile device to access their courseware and doing that while they're sitting on the bus would also benefit from that captioning. What we do is we try to ensure that we provide multiple means of representation to account for the fact that people perceive that information in more than one way. And then really finally, in line with our strategic network, sort of this front part, what we call the executive function of our brain, really thinking about how we provide multiple means of action, how we act on information, how we build skills, and how we go about expressing what we know. So if we, for example, say the only way to express what you know is by taking out a pen and writing a long essay, you can imagine that someone who has dysgraphia or someone who has a repetitive strain in their hand or someone who has limited physical mobility not being able to demonstrate what they know. Similarly, in the digital environment, if we ask someone to drag and drop and there was no keyboarding alternative for somebody who cannot drag and drop, well, we're getting a great answer about whether people can drag and drop. Generally, we don't want to assess that at the higher ed level. It's very important to provide multiple means of how we act on information and express what we know. But that again extends deeper into thinking about some people need different supports or more supports around planning and organizing and going from establishing a goal to completing it, right? Understanding that, okay, each week I want a reminder about what my deadlines are for just that week, or I want some condensed version of what is being focused on in this presentation that's being given online because I've got a lot of distracting variables, or I'm working while caring for a parent or whatever it is. So we think about providing different scaffolds and supports as well as choices for how people plan, set a goal, organize themselves in order to be able to act strategically. Our work at the Ames Center focuses on all these layers because accessibility is related to everything, right? If you can't access it, you can't then have a meaningful learning experience. Today, really the access layer is what we're going to kind of emphasize. And that's really about focusing on universal design, assistive technologies, accessibility of first approaches with our technologies so that all students can engage with our learning environments.
We're going to focus here specifically on digital accessibility compliance. So we're really talking about functional access to the materials, to the learning experience, to the technology. What we have to guide us around digital accessibility compliance here in the US is Section 508 of the Rehab Act of 1973 and the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And at the AIM Center, we have tried to contextualize, try to make these standards practical for educators to implement. So we'll walk through how we do that and some of the resources that we have available to support you. One way to bring up digital accessibility and compliance is to talk about some settlement agreements that have happened in the past. I'm going to pull out this one between the US and edX that comes from 2015. edX, of course, is the platform that was founded by Harvard and MIT. It's a massive open online course platform. The Department of Justice was doing a compliance review of edX and determined that the platform and the website were not in compliance. And there were a number of recommendations that were made, and these are not uncommon to other settlement decrees where Department of Justice is telling edX to make sure that your website, mobile applications, and learning management systems conform with accessibility standards, specifically Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0 AA, hire an accessibility consultant and conduct annual accessibility audits, develop guidance and training for content providers. So those are really common across all settlement decrees. But what was most groundbreaking about this settlement decree is that the Department of Justice took issue not just with the technology, just with the platform, but also with the content that edX was supporting. We're often asked at the AIM Center, well, what's most important for us to purchase to be accessible? And you can't make that decision because everything needs to be accessible in order for it to be interoperable. So whenever somebody says, well, we have to make a purchase, we have this many dollars to spend in our procurement, what do you recommend is most important that we purchase that's accessible? And it's really a false decision because if you purchase one thing that's accessible and everything else is not accessible, you won't have the interoperability that's necessary. So accessibility applies across all materials and technologies. And a way to think about that is to separate the two, because the materials, that's the information or the content that students are learning, whether it's a website, it's the video, it's the ebook, and all of those materials can be designed or they can be enhanced in a way that makes them accessible to the widest range of learner variability. So there you have your UDL. And then the technologies, that's the hardware, the software that delivers the material. So that's your learning management system, that's the video player, that's the design of the ebook. So it's what delivers the material. They need to talk to each other. If the material is designed to follow the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, but the technology isn't compliant with Section 508, they're not going to be interoperable. A student's AT is not going to work because one of those two in the synergy of learning is inaccessible to the student. So we need both accessibility as well as UDL practices in order for students to make progress toward becoming expert learners. What are some best practices? And we have some resources on our website to help guide and scaffold this process of determining if something is accessible, as well as evaluating in the procurement process and creating content. The model that we use is POUR. POUR is not the AIM Center's model. POUR is an acronym that comes from the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, from the Web Accessibility Initiative. POUR is a way to break down the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines into 4 principles. And those are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And this applies regardless of whether you're purchasing a material, whether you're creating a video, whether you're selecting or curating an open educational resource, regardless of whatever pathway you're taking to provide material or technology to your students, POUR is a framework that you can follow. So if something is perceivable, that means that it can be perceived through multiple means, whether it's you can see it, hear it. In the case of students who are blind and other students, it's tactile or braille. If it's operable, it means it's navigable by people who use assistive technology. If it's understandable, it's organized in a consistent and predictable format. And if it's robust, it's going to work across all operating systems and platforms. So some examples of some of the resources we have on our website for creating content. The first example here is video. We know that the most common way to make accessible a video is to add closed captions. Not all closed captions are created equal though. Captions need to be an alternative equivalent for students who are deaf or hard of hearing, but they need to be high quality in order to be equivalent to what students may be hearing. So on our website, you will find that we have some guidance on how to edit YouTube captions, not to just rely on auto captions, but to go and actually edit them to increase the quality of those captions. And what's not on on the slide, but I wanted to make everybody aware of is there are two ways to make a video accessible. Of course, one is through adding closed captions, but the other is through audio description. Audio description speaks aloud through a narrator, a voiceover, what's happening on the screen. And I have found that both closed caption and audio description together really enhances the content. When it comes to making something perceivable, it provides everything. It has the text, it has the audio, it has the visual. Accent Global is a company out of 3 young women from Stanford who started their own little audio description company, and they've grown it. Their tool, which is highly intuitive, we've been really impressed by it. I encourage you to take a look at. It's the most intuitive audio description tool that we've come across. Documents and slide decks, anytime you're making a Word document, Google Docs, slide deck, all of those can be made accessible through what's already built into those tools. So things like using headings and descriptive links, alt text, long description, all of those are built into word processing tools and presentation tools that are available to us. So we have guidance on how to do that. Of course, math is its own language, and that makes it difficult for a lot of students to perceive and to process. But there are a number of tools that are available that provide multiple means for the math notation for equations to be conveyed to students through speech supports and sonification. So we have those resources on our site. Finally, we have some examples around social media. And we know increasingly faculty are using social media as a way to communicate with students. And there's ways that you can make that accessible. So Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest, they all have, to some extent, some built-in accessibility supports that come through using closed captioning, audio description that can be added to video that's used in those social media platforms, image description. And then there are just some best practices around using plain language, camel case hashtags, and link shorteners. So those are just some examples that are also available on our website with additional guidance. When it comes to procuring, oftentimes the decisions around procurement are coming from the systems level. And of course, others who are working closer to the students are also making these decisions. So everybody needs to have the shared understanding that we're going to purchase accessible, that there's that stance. Because again, going back to the question, well, what should we purchase? What's the most important purchase that needs to be accessible? As we've demonstrated, if anything is purchased within the system that's not accessible, you're leaving a student vulnerable to barriers. So taking that as a stance to be an advocate for accessibility is really the first step. Use POUR, the perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust model in a product evaluation practices. And we have some examples of that on our website, some specific questions that you can ask that help walk through, is a material perceivable? Is it operable? Is it understandable? Is it robust? So some guiding questions to help that. Consult with campus ICT accessibility experts and your disability services personnel around accessibility. Learn about how students interact with materials and technologies using AT. I'm a former disability services personnel, and I can say how excited I always was when I got a call from faculty or even students coming in and saying, I heard that there are some tools that I could be using. Ask your department, your college, your university system, find out if accessibility language is included in contracts and purchase orders, and we have sample language on our website. And then on the next slide, we have the visual of our AIM quality indicators. These quality indicators are available across 4 different areas of education workforce development. So we have critical components for these 7 quality indicators for early childhood, K-12, higher ed, and workforce development. The key here is that these 7 quality indicators work together in an interdependent way to help agencies, institutions create coordinated systems for providing accessibility, making sure that timely manner is something that's understood by everybody. Thinking about the Office for Civil Rights, the definition of accessible being equally effective, equally integrated, substantially equivalent ease of use. So having accessible materials and technologies at the same time as their peers is essential to meeting accessibility compliance. Having written guidelines that are communicated to everybody, providing learning opportunities and technical assistance, which the AIM Center can help contribute to. Collecting data, using those data, and allocating resources purposefully are all part of our quality indicators. So on our website, there are some critical components that break down those quality indicators into specific actions that institutions can take. Here's a list of all the resources. These cover all of the examples, all the resources that we referenced as we went along are all available through these links. Best way to reach us, sending an email to AEM, that's for accessible educational materials, @cas.org. You can always visit us on our website, aem.cas.org.
Tori Trust at UMass Amherst put this together, Teaching Remotely in Times of Need. It is licensed under the Creative Commons Attribution Network, which basically means you can use this material. I'll even show you. You can change it, modify it. They just ask that you give credit back to the creator and the organization. But this is, I don't know, it's probably 80 slides full of just great resources. Like here, just to echo what Cynthia and Sam were saying, in terms of accessibility, check in with your students see what devices they're using, what they need help with. Throughout this PowerPoint, all of these are hyperlinks that embed and lead to other resources. And so Tori has just put this amazing plethora of resources together for faculty who are teaching in remote learning environments. She talks a lot about OER, open educational resources. And so I just want to share this. There's too much for me to even go through, but I do recommend you going through and looking at this. As you can see, it's just great information. She puts funny comics in it. And again, she just links to all these other resources that you might find really helpful